Let's welcome in the lead guitar player of Squares, the hip new band. Do we have Joe Satriani on the line here?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, can you hear us?
Joe.
Yes.
It's Don Jamieson and Jim Florentine, 2/3 of That Metal Show.
Yes.
Yeah, Trunk is missing in action. We don't know where he is.
Wait, you don't need that guy.
We couldn't afford him.
Yeah, I know. We're doing a low-budget show, so we couldn't afford Eddie.
Yeah, but our backs are tired of from carrying him all those years on That Metal Show. So off doing that Jamieson show now. But dude, it's I gotta say, man, it's really cool that you went back to revisit the past, but also because it's something that's so different. 1980 power pop. Why did you decide now is the time?
I know it's crazy, isn't it? Trip down memory lane. You know, it really had to do with two things. So go back a couple of years. My son Zizi did this documentary for me called Beyond the Supernova. And that whole process was pretty cathartic, you know, and just to have to go back and really talk about the whole career and everything like that. And that sort of, you know, that nudged that door open. And you compare that with what was happening since the Squares, which is I'm making all those solo records with the drummer from the Squares, Jeff Campitelli, and with my co-producer engineer, John Cuniberti. They were all part of the Squares team. And we just kept working together. So every time we would work on a new album, a solo album, we'd be sitting around talking about, hey, when are we going to do the Squares? You know, when's that going to come back up again? So anyway, after the whole the documentary, you know, having my 60th birthday on stage and the whole thing, I sort of had a different perspective about my past. And I thought, I should just let everybody know about all this stuff and just don't worry about what it might mean for the career. You know, I just approached it from a contrarian, you know, point of view. I gave John Cuniberti a call and I said, I think I'm ready. And it was good timing because John had been getting better and better at, you know, finding these old tapes, curating not only my entire catalog, but this Square stuff as well. And there was some better technology available last year where we could really get these 8-track, 16-track, 24-track tapes, put them in the oven, bake them, transfer them 96K to, you know, digital, and really start to think about producing the Squares record as if it were a new band of young 20-year-old kids who just happened to be early 80s freaks, you know.
Yeah.
And once we got our head straight on that, then it was a fun project.
Yeah, because it's so interesting, Joe, because I think of you because you're so progressive as a musician that you're always forward thinking. And I just found it really refreshing that you did go back and embrace this period of your career. And how's the feedback been so far from people?
Oh, it's crazy. Besides the fact that people see me with hair and they're like, oh my God, and the funny clothes and the whole thing. But it was really it has been a fantastic reception. People are listening to the music and picking up on things that we had originally thought was going to be what made us successful back then. And, you know, I should point out, we were wonderfully unsuccessful. I mean, we made no...
Jim and I know a lot about that, Joe.
I mean, we got turned down every time we went down to LA to do a showcase, and every time we brought, you know, our tapes down there and everything. They just didn't get us because, you know, back then we didn't fit into punk, new wave, real rock, classic rock, heavy metal, nothing. I mean, we were just a little bit of everything. Today, it's normal for bands to have all kinds of influences just from song to song, and the audiences don't mind. You know, they jump barriers all day long when they're listening to music. But back then, early 80s, it was different. Radio stations were vehemently, against, you know, the different styles of music. You wouldn't hear Billy Joel and Clash on the same radio station. You wouldn't hear Van Halen and Talking Heads on the same station. And so we had a hard time selling ourselves to the label, because the label would say, well, where are we going to sell you guys? What radio station is going to promote, a band that can't quite fit into any one genre? And yesterday's problem is now today's wonderful quality, and that's what's turning audiences on around the world now.
Do you think that like around '84 when MTV started hitting that you missed that boat with the kind of new wave kind of sound, pop sound, with all those videos, like Flock of Seagulls and all those bands just breaking with some kind of video? Like if you guys didn't start in 1980, 4 years later, maybe it would have caught on.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you should say Flock of Seagulls. We did a gig opening up for the Flock of Seagulls, and they were horrible to us. I'll never forget it. It's like, there's a rule, there's the 10 rules of show business, and one of them is never forget what they did to you, but never let them know you remember. But I'm telling you now, in case they're listening, right? I know they listen to you guys all the time. They were just a struggling local band that got, the privilege of opening up for Flock of Seagulls at the Keystone Palo Alto. And they wanted to use our drum riser. And of course, we said, well, they wanted to use our drum riser and not let us use it. So of course we said, well, you can't do that. So they said, okay, fine. So they went out, they bought a bunch of plywood and 2x4s, and they built the biggest drum riser that eventually made us not use our drum riser and had to play like the 2 feet left in front of the stage.
Right.
And they really stuck it to us, And it was one of those things you file away like, oh, okay, never do that ever to an opening band because they'll never forget it. That's one of those things. And they, so I always remember that. And I curse them secretly.
It's amazing that they said, look, we want to use your drum riser, but you guys can't use it.
I know. I was great.
Nerve.
I mean, I have to
hey,
give
can
it
we
to
use
them.
it too? After you guys, can we use it too? Instead, they go, no, you can't use it. We're only going to use yours.
Yeah. They set it up. They did a sound check. We didn't get a sound check, and they never took their drums down. So it was such a horrible thing to do, and it was unnecessary. They were big. They had a hit record. They didn't need to, step all over a teeny band.
Right, but they only had one hit record, Joe. And you would think with a guy with a hairstyle like that, he'd be a little more humble and not such a dick to the opening band. But Jim makes a good point, because Iran was a huge hit legitimately back then because of MTV. And I believe, from the stuff I heard, not only would the video of age probably would have helped you because you had a good looking singer in the band. That was a big requirement back then, right?
Yes.
You had the rock and roll hair down, and of course you were an emerging guitar player on the scene. But I also think you guys missed a boat on having songs in every John Hughes movie in the 80s.
That would have been great. I mean, I often think that if we had just produced and manufactured our own record, that we would have gotten a lot of headway. And that was a mistake we made. We were thinking like, let's not do it ourselves, because if it comes out and it's not successful, the powers that be in LA will say, see, they tried it themselves, it's not working, forget about it. So we held out for that big record deal, and it never came. Yeah. And here's a funny little story about that. One my nemesis back when I was in the Squares was this guy named Carter from Capitol Records. He never liked any of the demos that we sent him. He would come to see us play. He never had anything good to say about us. And I never actually met the guy back then, right? So in my mind, I'm thinking, like the rules of show business, right? I was like, I'm never going to forget this guy. And one of these days, I'm going to meet him. So sure enough, going back about 10 years, my first time ever playing with Chickenfoot, right? We're me and Chad and Mikey. We jump on stage at Sammy's gig in Vegas. We have a great time. We're backstage thinking, hey, we should start a band. We can call it Chickenfoot. It'll be crazy. And this guy comes up to me and says, hi, Joe, I'm Carter. And I'm Sam's manager. And there he was, my nemesis.
Yep, and the Rolodex is going on your head.
And there he was, and of course he turned out to be the greatest guy ever,
Wow.
and we became friends, and he helped Chickenfoot so much. But it's just so funny how things work out sometimes. You think those people that were so instrumental in holding you back actually turn out to be so instrumental in your success years later.
Right, and I'm glad that story has had a happy ending. But I do hope you keyed his car in the parking lot on the way out, just so he never forgets. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, Joe, is because I saw you briefly at the Experience Hendrix show.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And again, that was another thing that thought was so interesting, compelling about that tour was the lineup and people like you and Dave Mustaine sort of being, and maybe in my mind as a fan, an out of the box pick for a tour like that. So how was it for you experiencing Hendrix?
Oh, that was such a great tour. That may have been the most fun I've ever had on a tour, I got to say. But I mean, you got to say when you only have to play 30 minutes, I mean, there's a lot of physical stress that is totally removed from, the rigors of touring. It's not like you're up there for 3 hours playing way too many notes, over and over again.
Yep.
So that part was great. We would get all that energy run on stage, and we could sort of expend it in 30 minutes time. And so Kenny, Doug, and I just love that aspect of it. But then there's the other thing. You go on stage, you don't have a new record to sell, you don't have a new single, there's nothing to promote.
Yeah.
And the audience knows every song you're playing by heart. They've heard it for decades. And you get to pick like the greatest songs from, in this case, Jimmy's catalog. So everything was great about it. And the group that was there with us, this traveling circus, was just so much fun.
Yeah.
It was really great. I mean, and having, the different people on there, from Eric Johnson to Zakk Wylde, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, those two people shouldn't exist in the same universe, but it was great. And they would play together, to see Zakk go over and play keyboards while Eric Johnson's playing guitar. I mean, they were great times. And of course, the hang backstage was pretty funny.
Yeah, it was a terrific show, man. Again, I loved all the different flavors that everybody brought to it. So yeah, that was great. And then I wanted to ask you quickly about, because I'm not going to ask you about Chickenfoot. I'm just going to ask you if you're surprised at how much people ask you about Chickenfoot.
Yes. Yes. Wait a minute. Where's my Chickenfoot? It's sitting right here in my studio here, just in case people are wondering.
It's amazing the impact that those two records have had on people, that you're just really constantly asked about it. And I think it's because you're not doing it, and makes people want it more.
I guess so. Every once in a while, I'll go back and I'll listen to that first record that was done in the craziest way. And man, there's just so much energy in it, and it's so fresh and loose, and it's really something I love. And I've told you guys before, I'm the one who's always bugging Sam to put it together, make time for it. But everybody, I sound like a broken record, right? Everyone's got something to do. We're all so busy. And, Sam's right in the middle of promoting the new Circle album. So it's just like not the right time to even think about it, know. So
I mean, I think obviously fans understand that the people that comprise that group are a pretty busy group of individuals. If Jim and I had any musical talent, we're always available, and we'd be happy to fill in, but we don't.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to mention, because you have an instrumental album out that I'm holding up right now, and it's really terrific. What Happens Next? Fairly recent, right, Joe?
Yes. What is it? About a year and a half, a year and a third it's been out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I thought it was newer than that, but it's Chad Smith on drums, and it's Glenn Hughes on bass, which is so fantastic.
Love Glenn, man. One of the nicest guys in the business. Phenomenal talent.
Doesn't sing a note on the album, which again, I also like that, because that's the obvious.
He sang every day, every minute, every hour that we were there tracking. We did it down at Sunset Sound in Los Angeles, and we'd be doing we do a take, and then we, talk about things we want to change, right? And he'd be singing along with the track. Every time he would say, how about this? I can play this part. And he'd be singing along. And after a while, I started to write down the things that he was singing because they were really interesting.
Yeah.
And then when Chad was finished, he left. We had Glenn back for a day just to check all the bass parts. And I presented him with my notebook, and I said, look, I've been jotting down all these little things you've been scat singing. Could you play them? Like, can you actually play those vocal lines on your bass?
Yeah.
And these spots where I usually used to fill up with guitar bits, it'll just be bass bits. And so that's what he did. So we found spots in a good number of songs where you hear these bass improvisations. They actually were ones that he came up with vocally first. And then, he's so natural. He can play whatever he sings, and he can sing whatever he plays. So
yeah. Well, yeah. I'm a fan of all the albums, but especially for people who don't keep up as much as I do, particularly the last couple that you put out have been really fantastic. Just so many different flavors and tones and styles of music on it, and I'm going to let you go now because I know 2020 is going to be the 40th anniversary reunion tour of the Squares, so I'm sure you're busy planning that out for next year.
We have the flock of seagulls open for you guys.
Yeah, there we go.
They are, as a matter of fact, if they're listening.
Right.
By the way, I just want to let them know there's no sound check, and they can't. And we're using the drum riser.
Right, and there's a 3-foot space of the stage that you can play on, but
2.
Yeah.
They only get 2.
So yeah, check out the Squares, check out all Joe's instrumental music, and thanks a million, man, for coming on for a few minutes.
Thank you very much. It was so much fun. You guys don't need that Eddie Trunk guy. Come on, right?
Again, dead weight.